Thanks, Stephen, for sitting down and sharing some thoughts on your on 9fin and the development of 9fin. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about the history, how you got going with 9fin?
Sure thing. So 9fin was kind of started from my personal frustration. I used to work in banking at JP Morgan, and there my job was to help companies borrow money in order to buy other businesses or to scale their own business. And after that, I worked at an asset management firm, and there my job was to kind of lend companies money and decide whether I wanted to invest people's pension money. And I was very frustrated because the technology was terrible and the data was non-existent. It was really difficult for me to get what I needed to do my job, and a lot of the workflows were really inefficient. And so I complained about it a lot. And one of the people who had to listen to me complain was my friend from university, Huss, who I lived with at the time. And after a few years of complaining, I walked into his room one day and said, I think we can build a really big business in this space using technology. Do you want to come and do it? And that's ultimately what led to the beginning of what became 9fin.
I mean, we are obviously very technology focused in our investments. As you know, one of the things we liked obviously about 9fin was that it's really a textbook example of how you can apply technology to actually proverbially 10x your product offering. And 9fin got going with computer vision and machine learning in the beginning, extracting complex data. And but you like to refer to 9fin as a technology-first company and not a machine learning or AI-first company, even though you're using the latest technology also in AI. How do you keep ahead of technology and choosing the technologies that you want to integrate in your product?
I mean, I think Haas is a great co-founder for this because he's so plugged into whatever the latest development is. And we also have an amazing engineering team. And if you're on our Slack, it's just every single day there's a new paper from whatever conference or whatever latest breakthrough there's been. So having a team that are at the cutting edge, who are super experienced, who live and breathe kind of every new development is super powerful. And so they're always thinking with the lens of 9fin of, oh, here's a new interesting technology that's been applied somewhere else. Can we apply that to what we do here?
That's cool. You mentioned Haas a couple of times already. You're your co-founder and CTO. What struck us when we invested 4 years ago was that you guys are super complementary. We loved that. How does this show in the day-to-day business and of you guys running the company?
Yeah, so whenever we were thinking about setting up the company, we went to a couple of events, a couple of conferences, and we met one or two firms that were kind of doing things in the technology space. And I would speak to the CEO and I would say, hey, what like kind of coding language do you use, or like what's your tech stack? And they said, oh no, I don't know, you got to speak to the tech guy, the CTO. Yeah. And then you speak to the CTO and you say, like, who are the customers and why do they care about the product? Like, oh, I don't know, I'm just a tech guy, you got to speak to the CEO. Yeah. And for Huss and I, it was important that we were never like that, in that I know how to code, I'm not great, but I know enough to be dangerous. And Huss worked in finance, and where we met was on the investment society. So we've got very different skill sets, but there's just enough of an overlap in the kind of Venn diagram that we know to let each other get on with their own part of the business, but also to be helpful and to have a little bit of overlap and understanding of how all of 9fin works.
Yeah, and also challenging each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And we're like an old married couple now. We've known each other for more than a decade. So, it's very usual for us to butt heads and figure things out. And I think that's also quite unique. A lot of founders haven't spent that amount of time with each other.
Yeah. The one thing that also struck me was you mentioned that both you and Haas, you kind of contemplated a possible culture or how you would keep or build the culture in your company even before you actually got going on 9fin. Is that something that is part of the success of the strong growth of 9fin? I mean, 9fin is growing in the top line revenues, but also as an organization. Yeah. It's 270 people. Is this part of the success?
Absolutely. And I mean, we have 11 company values, which is too many, so we will refine it. But each one of those came from a story. Yeah. A story from things that we'd experienced in our previous careers that we didn't want to be reflected at 9fin. So, for example, like family and health comes first. And I think, there's no client or piece of work that's more important than your health or your family. So we have these kind of 11 values, all that have these stories behind them. But if I and we crafted those at our kitchen table in London in our flat before we even had a company name. Because we said, if we're going to do this together, we want to do it in the right way. We want to build a company the right way. And so that's really critical to kind of everything that we do. And it flows from the fact that until we were probably 100 people, we did every single final round interview as founders to make sure that people were, compatible with the values and the type of company that we were trying to build. Yeah. And in our space, you can build a great product, but I think a big part is having great people and attracting and retaining great people, and culture is so important for that.
Absolutely. The other thing is that you describe yourself as a product-focused CEO. What does that mean, and how does this show or how is that reflected in the company, and how is that reflected in how you run 9fin?
I guess that's actually one of the things that changes as you scale. I can't work with every individual engineer, and I can't be project managing a specific project or product anymore. But I'm very close to everything that's on the product roadmap, because ultimately we're kind of solving the problems that I had and experienced in my day-to-day life. So I have a little bit of a kind of superpower that I can understand a little bit of the technology, but I also understand some of the business problems, and so can help the product engineers and say, look, no, I don't think that's going to work. Maybe do it this way, or this might work.
Initially started out in the UK, UK market, European market, European debt capital markets.
Yes.
Then you went fairly early on into the US market, this being the biggest market opportunity for you. How do you see that step, or the success of that step? Now the US is growing five times faster than Europe was growing. What's the success of that US launch?
I think we did a reasonably good job of entering the US market. I think we're lucky that the product offering that we have is very similar in terms of we didn't need to reinvent the wheel to go to the US market. It was more about, did we have the data for US companies on the platform? Did we have enough people in that market in order to cover it effectively? Yep. And so I went out there a few years ago. We went from no one in the US, no clients, to like a team of 70 or so today. So we built out a really great team of talent, and then we added the data on the platform, and then the kind of go-to-market piece after that. So this year is very much about scaling up the go-to-market, expanding even more aggressively in the US. US is about 25% of our revenues today, and it should be closer to 50% by the end of this year, and that's it's the biggest market opportunity. But also the European product still continues to grow from strength to strength, so we've got plenty of room to run there as well.
One thing that now working with you for the past 4 years, what always strikes me is that you are extremely fast thinker. Things cannot go fast enough for you. How did you get the organization of 9fin to keep up with your speed?
I mean, I think product velocity and delivering new things and making quick decisions, I think, is like something that's so important for an organization. And even when we're thinking about developing new products and tools and features, I'm thinking, do we want to have 3 meetings and 10 client discovery calls, and we've got 4 different documents. In the same time, we could have just shipped the thing and see if it worked. And so that biased action and like urgency around let's try things, let's ship things, let's develop things, we try to have that flow throughout the whole organization. And I think, as you get bigger and you have an existing customer base you have to support, you've got technical debt, which that approach causes, which you then have to go back and fix. It can feel sometimes like you're slowing down, even though you've got more people and more capital. So it is tricky to maintain that velocity, but I think everyone in the team has a kind of sense of urgency and impatience. And when I think about our company culture, I boil it down to, we want to be very driven and look back at what we achieved in a year's time and say, wow, look at how much we achieved as a team, as a company, how much we progressed personally, but also that we had a lot of fun along the way. Yep. And I think keeping those two things in balance is really important as well for making sure that we continue to do things fast.
Yeah. How do you check when you hire new people, how do you check for the fit of new people for 9fin? Also when you do the speed and then the execution, the bias to execution, how do you check for that when you hire new people?
So we've probably gotten more sophisticated at this over time. So we have a pretty structured interview process in terms of first round interview where, it's a kind of sense check on the person and their credentials and their background. We've got a really good talent team which we've scaled up. And then typically a case study task. And what we're assessing is the person's ability to do this job well. And the particular skills that we're testing for. And then when we get to a kind of hiring manager or a founder stage interview at the end, it's again digging into anything that looks unusual or any concerns that any other interviewers might have had. So I think that process has become much more structured versus the early days. And so far, we've managed to do a pretty good job of making sure that we get people who are the right fit.
Yeah, you must have done a good job, because when you look at the leadership team, more than half of the leadership team is actually homegrown talent. That leads me to think there must be a really great steep learning curve available for people at 9fin. Is that true? How do you see that? And how do you give people the freedom and the responsibilities early on, or what drives these steep learning curves for people at 9fin?
Yes, I think so. We really focus on people being autonomous and being able to get stuff done. We don't micromanage people. We say, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve. Go and make it happen, and tell me how I can support and what you need. And there are a number of people at 9fin who started off even as interns with us 6-7 years ago, and are now running global teams and very large parts of our org chart. Some people who started also in roles, for example, Jen, who's our COO now, started as our head of HR and our head of people, and then graduated into kind of operations and now COO. Our VP of Finance, Carrie, we promoted to CFO extremely quickly because it was very clear that she was extremely capable. So people can progress very fast at our company if they work hard and are doing a great job.
What's in store for 9fin in the future? Where's 9fin going?
So we'll keep doubling year over year and keep our investors happy. But I think broadly, our ambition is and has always been that you can build a very big business in this space, and debt markets are the largest, most important asset class in the world, and there's no shortage of problems for us to solve in that space. And when I was growing up, my dad always used to tell me whenever we were watching a football match, no one remembers second place, and so that's how I think about 9fin as well, is that we're going to be number one, in terms of analytics in debt markets. And we want to try and get there as quickly as possible. Yeah,
you mentioned keeping your investors happy. How do your investors keep you happy?
That's a great question. I think we're lucky that we've got a very supportive group of investors, and at our board they push us, they challenge us, but they also reassure us and help guide us. If things aren't going so well. So I think having people who've got experience in our markets, who've got experience of scaling businesses quickly and globally on our board, who can help, give us advice and mentorship as first-time founders is really, really valuable. And then, also your folks at Superpower is around fundraising. You do it all the time, every day, with different companies, and see thousands of pitch decks every year. And for us as founders, we've probably fundraised 4 or 5 times in total. So having expertise around, who to speak to, who might be a good fit for future investment, when to raise capital in terms of what the business might need to go a little bit faster or to future-proof it is really valuable as well.
You had particularly high interest for the last funding round, the last couple of funding rounds. How do you explain that? Is that obviously there's strong growth at 9fin, there's very efficient growth at 9fin, there's extremely good client feedback, but how do you get this momentum? And you closed this 50 million Series B round just recently. How did you get the momentum around 9fin in the end?
I think we had very strong metrics on whether it was top line growth at scale, more than 100% year over year. We've got great customer feedback, as you mentioned, great client retention. People see the strength of the product and how complex the product it is, but how easy it is to use whenever they also see the demos. And then I think also the company has a sense of momentum and inevitability about it, that it's going to be a large and successful business. And I think the investors can see that. And also, whenever we were almost every time we've raised in the last 4 years, we've been in a position of strength where we didn't need to raise the capital. And the business would have been close to cash flow break even before our last round. And so I think there's kind of no better time to raise money than when you probably don't need it.
Absolutely.
And then that gives you the firepower for expanding more quickly and more aggressively, so we can get to that kind of vision faster.
Well, one last point on the collaboration with your investors. What strikes me, or what's always a question, is how do you run your board meetings with your investors? And what strikes me with you and the team at 9fin, we always have very structured board meetings. We have very well defined timeline. And how do you see the board meetings? What value do you get out of the board meetings? What's your advice for founders? how to run their board meetings? Because obviously that's a question that often comes up. I guess there's a different, preferences that people have, but what's your experience? What's the best way to run board meetings to have value for you and the team at LionChain?
This is something I'm still learning, if I'm honest. And I think how we've run our boards has evolved over time. I speak to a lot of other founders about this at different stages to see how they find their boards and how they find value in them. Should boards be a corporate governance matter and kind of a reporting of how the business is doing it? If it's just that, then why not just send the slides and do everything async if there's any questions? So that doesn't feel like that's quite enough. Should it be something where you go and you have a less structured discussion about the biggest and most difficult topics for the company, what the management team and the investors think you should do? Or, is it, the way I've found it probably most valuable is that I think it's really powerful as a forcing function for you as founders, but also for the leadership team to have to take a step back every quarter or every couple of months and think longer term and think bigger picture and assess, are we going in the right direction? And put those structured thoughts on paper and then be able to discuss them. So I think that's probably one of the most valuable things about boards for me, is being able to step back. And also when you're so in the details of running the business day to day, to have an external perspective from someone who's a little bit more elevated in terms of looking at other different companies and isn't in the weeds of what you're doing can give you a fresh perspective, and that can also be very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
Was great, and thanks for sharing the thoughts on LionChain.
Thanks so much, Harald.